to Block and Build, a podcast from Convergence Magazine. I'm your host and the publisher of Convergence, Caden Mock. On this show, we're building a roadmap for the movement that's working to block the impacts of rising authoritarianism while building the strength and resilience of the broad front that we need to win. On today's episode, we are building our Attention Economy Navigator for the month of April 2026. The goal of Block and Build has always been to help organizers figure out what's happening, how people are responding, and get a sense for what's working out there in the world. The Attention Economy Navigator is our way of visually mapping some of the most and least talked about news stories of the month and help our audience orient towards what's worth their attention and what could use a little less. Here's how the Navigator works. My panel of guests, who you'll meet in a moment, will work with me to plot some of the most discussed news stories from the past month onto a two-dimensional graph, reflecting where we think they fall on a spectrum of signal versus noise on one axis and conspiracy versus reality on the other. If you'd like a visual, you can always watch this episode on YouTube or find the final graph in an article form on our website. To explain this better, let's take a trip back to high school geometry and envision a standard XY graph. On the x-axis, we're measuring signal versus noise, with high signal being furthest to the right and high noise being furthest to the left. Noisy stories are those with little meaning. They're part of the chatter, but they aren't going to stick with us, and they don't mean much to our long-term media and political environment. Contrast that with high signal stories, which have deep, long-term implications and impact on our world. Then on the y-axis, we're measuring consensus reality versus conspiracy theory. High reality stories are those that are really happening. These are based in hard reporting, they're rooted in consensus reality, and are observable in the world. High conspiracy stories, on the other hand, are those which are a little more speculative. They might be actual conspiracy theories, or they might be based in wild conjecture. So that leaves us with these four quadrants. The top right quadrant is high signal and high reality. These are the stories that are meaty, they demand our attention, and they're both happening and they mean something. Those that are high noise and high conspiracy fall in the bottom left quadrant and probably deserve a little less attention, even if people on the internet cannot stop talking about them. High noise, high reality stories are things that we don't think will last the media cycle, while high signal and high conspiracy stories are a particularly interesting category. They're maybe driven by a conspiracy theory, but they tell us something meaningful about our world. This finalized graph plot will be linked in the show notes. You can also find it over on Convergence's website so that you can follow along. You can also pop over and watch this episode, of course, on our YouTube channel, where producer Josh is helping us lay out the graph in real time. To help build this month's Attention Economy Navigator, I am joined by Negin Owliaei, the editor-in-chief at Truthout, which is one of our sibling publications in the Movement Media Alliance, as well as Bridget Todd, the award-winning tech reporter and host of the podcast There Are No Girls on the Internet and IRL, AI in Real Life, and someone I've known for quite some time from the world of digital advocacy. And Bridget, I also understand that you're about to release your first audiobook?
That is true. Thank you for that lovely introduction. My new audiobook with Simon Schuster is called Love at First Prompt. It's out on July 14th. All about folks who have intimate connections with AI and really what we give up when we allow tech companies into the most intimate parts of what it means to be a human.
That's some really interesting shit. Thank you so much for making the time to join us, Bridget.
The pleasure is all mine.
And it's great to see you, as always, Negin.
Great to see you as well.
So we've collected our headlines, and so I will prompt each of you to introduce a story, and then we'll put 5 minutes on the clock for discussion and placement. We all ready?
Let's do
it.
Awesome. Well, let's start with Bridget. I kind of want to start with this story about the FBI terrorism case, the Prairieland case that we've talked about on the show before. But tell us a little bit about this story about how the prosecution was able to retrieve supposedly deleted signal messages.
Yes. So I'm so glad that you all have kind of covered this case because it is an alarming one. And I was pretty alarmed to find out that the way that the FBI was able to forensically extract copies of incoming Signal messages from a defendant's iPhone, even after the Signal app was deleted. And that's because copies of the content of those messages were saved in the iPhone's push notification database. Listen, I'm a huge proponent of Signal. I donate to Signal. I would say like 90% of the communication I have professionally and personally happens on Signal. But finding out that if somebody were to have physical access to your phone and can run like specialized software on it, it can yield sensitive data derived from even secure messaging apps like Signal. And so I've kind of got a bee in my brain about this story because I think that folks should know that Signal has a setting that blocks messages, that content from displaying in your push notifications. You just got to turn it on. We should all turn it on.
Yeah, I also when I read this I was first reported, I think, in 404 Media, and when I read it, I was like, oh crap, like my settings need to be changed. Where do you think that this falls on our graph here?
I think the matrix location would be top right because the reality, it is grounded in reality. It is grounded in real, real shit that is happening. And also the consequences are like all too real. Like this could really have deep, deep, real, lasting consequences for somebody's real life.
I also think, I think it's also worth noting that like this is not an issue with Signal itself as a piece of software. It is about the sort of friction between like iOS as the platform and then Signal as the app. Which
Exactly.
I think I've seen a lot of chatter in like some like local activist groups who are like, should we not be using Signal? And it's like, no, this is still like the best sort of the industry standard, like the best tool. It's like the weakest point in all of our security culture is going to be humans ultimately. And like I think a lot of this is a story about humans.
I love that framing. And again, I'm a huge fan of Signal and it's what I recommend folks use. And that context is really important. And I think just stepping back, as we inch ever closer to authoritarianism in the current hellscape in which we live, these conversations are so important. I always encounter friends that are like, oh, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't have anything to hide. And I always say, well, even if you personally are not an activist or a journalist, you're friends with me, your friend Bridget. So like you are my shit is only as secure as your shit. So,
Yeah.
Even if you don't necessarily feel like you need to take this level of precaution, you absolutely should be.
Yeah. Negin, do you have any thoughts about this story? Do you think this is in the right place on the graph?
Totally agree. And I think one thing that you're pointing out here too is that like there's actually action you can take around it, which is a really great point, right? So like I'm sure like other people who read the story immediately thought back, what does my iPhone have stored for my Signal messages? Like delete, 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 delete. But then I was really heartened to see how many different friends were sending it to me and how much conversation was sparked by this about what we can do to protect ourselves. And in some ways I feel like there's this digital nihilism, like there's nothing you can do that can protect yourselves, but it almost felt like it was going to lead to that. But then you started to see like, no, here is actually how we can protect ourselves. And I thought that was heartening and definitely puts it like hard in the reality camp for me as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a great spot for it too. Negin, let's go to one of your stories next. And we obviously have been talking a lot about Iran and the war on Iran on the show, but you have a story about these like AI generated like Lego meme videos that are like being at least boosted, if not created by the government. Like, what is the deal with these? Tell us about the background and what they kind of say about the state of this global conflict.
What is the deal with these videos? Is I think something we're going to be asking ourselves for a long, long time. They're wild. I mean, I'll describe them a little bit for people who I don't know how people haven't seen them at this point, but in case you haven't, it's little Legos. That's a really great explanation right there. It's like little Legos with missiles, pretending to be Trump or Netanyahu or members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, or Epstein features really prominently into them, and they're like narrating the war from an Iranian state perspective. There's some conversation whether or not, how tied are these Lego videos to the state, the Iranian state, and it's a little bit TBD. But I think there's a lot to talk about, and I think in some ways, like my first reaction when I was thinking about these videos is high conspiracy. First of all, they're like literally just including conspiracy theories, right? So that's that's like half of what makes them up. Though there is a lot of reality too, right? So they draw on actual violence that you have seen perpetrated by the US and Israel. So they mention like the Minab schoolgirls who were killed. Like those come up. Those are a really heavy theme. They talk about a lot of the attacks on infrastructure that we've already seen in Iran. So while there is reality, like they're really playing in the conspiracy realm more than anything else. And I would say it's decently high noise, but I think there's some signal here too, because the fact that this is breaking through, I think is like a huge thing for people to think about, because it shows, first of all, just how global internet culture is, that you're seeing people in Tehran that are engaging with these like really like memes that some of the things I have to actually look up. Cause I'm like, what are they even talking about here? I, in the US, as very like a digital native, have not seen this. So I think that's really interesting. It also, they're coming at a time where you see that like half of the punditry in the United States doesn't even know who runs Iran right now. Like they literally can't get the names right. So
Right.
the like disconnect between who's following what, who sees what. I think like it has a lot of interesting things to bring up for those of us in the US, especially in the media space.
Yeah. I don't know, Bridget, have you seen any of these meme videos?
I have, and I think you placed it very well because, and I mean, it is what it is. I will say that these videos made me understand how good whoever is making them are at like speaking to people, because I was watching them kind of being like, oh, look at these meme videos coming out. By the end, I'm like, wow, like they're just very effective. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's also interesting about it is there was a time not very long ago where a lot of people, a lot of commentators and pundits are talking about how good the American far right is at internet culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's really funny about these two is that it's sort of this moment of the American far right being kind of pwned on the internet. Like, it really shows how quickly the tides can turn, that like you can't be good at the internet forever, and like somebody is going to be better at you at the internet pretty fast.
And I think with this current presidential administration, their whole thing is trolling. And I think of all the things that they can be bested at, but being better at memes and trolling, I think is one that really stings, because we know that's a currency they actually care about.
Absolutely. And I mean, on that point too, it's thinking about there's this kind of reality in these Lego videos that I think, as I mentioned, they're talking about actual things that are happening in a way that you don't see in the Trump administration's like weird, like Call of Duty-esque. Sorry, I don't know. I'm not a gamer, but like they're weird, like violent video game videos that they were trying to make at the beginning of the war that we've kind of seen slow down a little bit. And so I feel like there's this point of like, this is one interesting and very odd outlet that we've seen for people to get their rage at the administration across, and also the rage at like the lack of an organized opposition toward the war. So it's like the memes, like that's something that is actually capturing people's attention. I think says a lot for a lot of things.
Yeah, no, and I think that this is a good place for it, that it's like it's kind of closer to the line between noise and signal for this reason, that it's like there are a lot of ways that we can read it, but it ultimately is like the vibes are a little conspiratorial for sure.
Definitely. Trump's bruised hand.
Yeah, right? Like everybody's like trying to decode all this stuff. Let's talk about something else so one of the stories that I, as a Californian, have been following a lot, and unfortunately, I mean, I think there are things about this that are unfortunately sort of conspiratorial and also unfortunately very real, is Eric Swalwell. The member of Congress who just resigned. There's going to be a special election to fill his seat in August. He represents kind of like the southern part of the East Bay, so like Dublin, Pleasanton on south. And he was also the Democratic frontrunner in the race for governor of California. This story is about him being basically like a serial sexual predator as a boss. And it's really grim stuff. I mean, there are now going to be multiple criminal investigations into his conduct, both here in Alameda County and then also in Manhattan and potentially elsewhere. Like, it is some pretty grisly, frightening, just like, if you look up any more information about this story, I cannot like trigger warning this enough for anybody who has any kinds of, triggers around sexual assault. It's a kind of thing where also, from what I've heard from political commentators here in the Bay, is that like there have been rumors about Swalwell making inappropriate sexual comments to his staff, but like a lot of people have been acting really surprised that this guy engaged in such egregious and like frankly criminal activity. There are a lot of implications to this story, right? Like, as the sort of frontrunner, the Democratic frontrunner in the California governor's race, like we have a primary coming up in June. And the way that our primaries for governor work is that it's a top two. It's a nonpartisan top two. So the top two vote getters out of everybody who's running for any party then go on to the general and then face off in the general. And so I think there's some real anxiety about the fact that there are a lot of Democratic candidates, none of whom are really pulling a significant number of supporters. There are these two Republican candidates who are frankly terrifying. Each of them are terrifying for different reasons, who are polling better than a lot of the Democrats, aside from Swalwell. So there are a lot of things that are kind of at play here. Part of the reason that I was like, I mean, this is mostly reality. Part of the reason that I was like, what is the conspiracy element here? And the conspiracy element is like, a lot of the Democratic establishment has been really behind Swalwell as the candidate for governor. A lot of his fellow members of Congress from across California, Nancy Pelosi endorsed him. You know, he was being supported by the Democratic establishment in a way that was really helping his star rise as a political figure. And so that feels conspiratorial to me, that like these folks in positions of power were willing to overlook or not look carefully into these rumors about his behavior. Unfortunately, this is like a very common thing, right? With like people, especially like men, especially white men, who people are like, great, he's going to take care of something. We'll overlook some untoward rumors about him and not look into it and ignore it. But unfortunately, I think this is high reality. This is like on the reality side. And I do think it's like more signal than noise. I mean, I think one of the things I've been thinking a lot about, there's been several stories over the past week about men, especially men in politics, and like violence against women. And it just feels like there's a shift happening around this. And I'm not really sure yet how to understand it. But yeah, I think I want to put it there in like high signal, but sort of like there are some conspiratorial elements to this story. I'm wondering if either of you have thoughts about placing it.
I think it definitely belongs in the real. I like that placement because I agree with you on the conspiratorial side. One of the things, I mean, you mentioned that we've been seeing rumors about this from Swalwell for a while, you know, so it was, I'm surprised that anyone was surprised when the actual articles came out that were so heavily documented. Like if anyone reads it, like the amount of sources, it's like we saw the text messages that this person sent around this time, several different people with, I mean, you know, with similar kind of MOs. And so it's it's so based in reality, and yet the element of surprise makes me surprised. And so for that reason, I feel like keeping it in reality, even though you have this kind of larger apparatus that allowed it to happen, or, you know, kind of look the other way while it did happen, feels like the right move.
Yeah, I completely agree. You broke that down beautifully. And I think, yeah, that is the psyop to me, is that how many folks in leadership or in positions of power who have the ability to do something are willing to do nothing and throw up their hands if they think a prominent white man is going to be the savior. How many different institutions and people with power will quickly line up to align behind that reality? And I really just got to shout out the brave women who spoke up. I've seen a lot of the conversation online, and I think I'm happy that they're getting support, but it's not all support. And I think that especially for women who are coming out to say something about somebody who is, you know, seems to be rising to power on the left, coming out to speak out against something that person did is even scarier, because you don't know how people are going to react. You don't know, people are going to be like, why are you ruining this? Like, what are you, a Republican? Like, and so I think it's that much harder to stay firm in your conviction. It's not easy to come forward about stuff like this. So
it's
shout out to them.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that like the other thing with regards to that is I forget which reporter, I think is a KQED reporter. I was listening to a KQED podcast about this recently, and she was like, as a member of the press corps who covers California politics, like, this is making me take a good long look at the questions that I'm asking and how I'm complicit in this. And I thought it was so refreshing that she would say something like that, as, you know, somebody in progressive media looking at somebody who's in like more mainstream media being like, have I been complicit in this? And I was like, wow, that again, it feels like a shift. And I think that there's, in some ways, this is like maybe downstream effects of Epstein, right? Where like people are really changing the way that they think and talk about sexual abuse and like its effects on our political and social systems.
Yeah. And something else I just want to add about this is, I don't know if this pushes it more into the conspiracy or reality piece, but a conspiracy that I think we're letting go of, or I hope we're letting go of, is that what somebody who is in a position of power or leadership does in their personal life does not impact how they lead. In fact, those two are one and the same. And so I think abandoning that idea that like, oh, well, what he did in his personal life, he could still be a good leader. No. It's those two things are very much related.
Yeah, those the days of that being the sort of like party line is over, and thank God, honestly.
One more thought on it too is just like the power that a member of Congress has in so many different ways allows them to actually get away with so much more too. So I'm hoping that we see some kind of congressional reckoning, because we're hearing more stories, kind of coming through about like where have other abuses of power been. And so, yeah, I hope in terms of the signal placement of it, I feel like there's for so many reasons, but that's for me, one of them is keeping it over there is because I hope it's a story that doesn't die for a while. I hope people keep asking the questions.
Bridget, I'm going to ask you to talk about kind of a silly story, which is the story about Drewski's skit making fun of conservative white women, and the rumor that Erica Kirk is suing him over it. Can you tell us a little bit, and also tell us a little bit about the skit in case people haven't seen it? I mean, I'd be surprised.
I can tell you so much about it. So I think Drewski's hilarious. He is a comedian. He is known for these viral skits where he really undergoes what I would call a physical transformation into someone else. He has one where so Drewski himself is a black man. He has one where he transforms himself through full body makeup into a white man at a NASCAR event. And when I say like the level of dedication to detail, he has make-upped his skin to make it look like he has a farmer's tan sunburn. Like, that's how dedicated Drewski is.
He's an artist. What can we say?
He's an artist. He's serious about his shit. So he transformed into a white conservative woman for a skit called How Conservative Women in America Act. He has the blonde hair. He has the manicure, the rings. The internet went wild for it. It went totally viral. Interestingly enough, people assumed he was doing a impression of Erica Kirk. He never actually said Erica Kirk's name. People just like automatically were like, this is rude to Erica Kirk.
I think it was the pyrotechnics, to be clear.
Yes, fair. We covered this on my own podcast, but there was even a situation where Grok, the AI chatbot on X, identified a picture of Drewski in the makeup as Erica Kirk. And so that's not coming from Drewski, it's coming from Grok, right? So the story went super viral. Everyone's talking about it. And then the internet said, Erica Kirk has spoken and she is suing Drewski for defamation. So I saw this story everywhere. I saw tweets from Erica Kirk. I saw tweets from her saying that President Trump was involved in it and that Trump was going to be reaching out to Drewski. I even saw a video that appeared to show Drewski showing court papers that he had been served from Erica Kirk. The only problem was none of this is true. That was just a very, very convincing AI deepfake. An AI deepfake that, had I not researched this story myself to talk about it on my podcast, I would have thought it was real. And so, yeah, if you're seeing stories about Erica Kirk suing Drewski or responding to Drewski, it's all fake, even though it was everywhere.
It's so wild. It's also, I mean, I think the thing that's really funny about it too is like, it all feels like it's so credible, right? It's like, of course she would be litigious. It's just, is any of the like Erica Kirk response real? Has she even said anything about it?
She's not, as far as we know, she's not responded at all.
Incredible.
In any capacity.
It's so wild.
Genuinely, had I not looked into this, I would have thought, because the tweets look very convincing, they're written in a way that she would actually speak. And I just think that it just goes to show when everybody is talking about something, which everybody was certainly talking about this skit when he first did it. Like, there are engagement farmers out there that will use any trick to get a little bit of engagement to keep you talking about it and to get your eyeballs. And it's very effective.
Yeah, big attention economy vibes, for sure.
Yes.
So I assume this goes all the way to the left on noise. In terms of conspiracy versus reality, where would you plot it?
I mean, it's conspiracy because I think it might seem like a psyop, but like I do just generally think that it's engagement farming. Somebody's just trying to get a little bit of your eyeballs and your attention online and doing it very effectively. So I will put it all the way in the conspiracy area.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. I mean, I also think that like maybe there is like a little bit of a lesson to learn here in terms of like, again, how we focus our attention. That's like, there's something about like all of the storylines around Erica Kirk in general that like, for some reason we kind of like the internet kind of can't get enough of, but it's like, what is consequential about her right now anyway? I do also think that one of the things that I've seen pop up in the discourse, including about Erica Kirk, more recently is this Vance rally that she apparently was supposed to be at that was basically like not attended, and so like they like basically were like, we're not going to do this, and so it's like, I don't know, there's people want to share stories about Erica Kirk both on the left and the right, and I think that there's a lesson here maybe in like, how do we refine what we pay attention to in ways that actually like help us instead of just sort of like spin our wheels.
I think we're also so primed to assume that she's going to be litigious because of all the people who got like fired or lambasted for talking about Charlie Kirk in the first place. So the idea is like, well, of course these people are going to not let this stand. But, it's hard. Yeah, again, it's like almost hard not to believe because it feels so true, right?
Yeah,
so I think that little kernel of truth like almost makes it more conspiracy. But yeah.
Totally.
Definitely. And Caden, to your point about how the internet kind of can't get enough of Erica Kirk, I feel the same way. I always click into stories about her. If there's a story about her, I'm reading it. And it's just a good reminder that just like our president, Erica Kirk got her start on reality TV. She did a 3-episode arc on Bravo Summer House.
There you
People
go.
who are good at reality TV are very good at capturing your attention. So just remember that when she's all over the internet, coming out on stage to pyrotechnics.
Amazing. Negin, well, there's two things that you've brought to us that I think are like, I want to talk. I'm curious which one you want to talk about first. And one is about Ahmed Shihab Eldin. And then the other one is, I feel like we have to talk more about Viktor Orban and his crushing defeat in Hungary. What do you want?
Let's do that. Let's start with Orban, and we can, go on to Ahmed after. Yeah.
Great. Tell us a little bit about, I guess, like, we also talked about the story last week on the show, so I think a lot of our listeners have been paying attention to this. But I'm curious about the sort of like elements of this story, especially now that it's kind of like settled into our collective consciousness a little bit. What are the things that you're paying attention to and noticing about the way that we're talking about it?
Totally. And I think that's a great way of framing it, because I feel like to me that's part of the signal to noise question here, right? So one thing, and I'm not sure if both of you have seen this, but I got sent this op-ed from the New York Times, this editorial board piece from the New York Times that was like, here's how, Peter Magyar beat Viktor Orban. Like, here's how you defeat an authoritarian. And the answer was like, focus on the economy and just forget about individual people. It was just like, it was totally, completely, first of all, evidence, none of it. There was no evidence. Not at all evidence-based. It was just like the vibes that the editorial board always is going for. And if people need a refresher, like this guy, the incoming leader of Hungary, he is a former Orban insider. So he's coming from that party. I think some things that are important to talk about and we're hearing more about now is like, he's still pretty anti-immigrant, which the New York Times also kind of picked up on, or like they talked about, which is wild for me that you think that that's a relevant lesson to take in the United States in 2026 when ICE is like one of the defining features of our lives right now. So to think, oh, you should just steer away from immigration if you want to beat Trumpism seems like totally made up. So I think it's worth getting into the details about like what Hungary is going to look like under Magyar's rule, right? So I think that's an important thing to consider. But at the same time, there is also like some really good, like really well reported pieces. Waging Nonviolence had a piece this week that's talking about like what it means to be acting locally in your community and to be kind of shutting down authoritarianism wherever you find it. And these are also key to his win. So in some ways, obviously it's real. So I want to put it up on, kind of the high-ish on reality, like Orban is gone. That's amazing. But I will also say like some of it is like maybe in the middle in terms of signal and noise. Like there is a lot of that stuff that's real there, and there's a lot of stuff that I think we should kind of just tune out too.
Yeah. No, that makes sense to me, because I think that like it does raise a bunch of questions about like, what does governing after you oust an authoritarian look like? And it seems to me that one of the most salient lessons is how high the turnout was for this election. That's like Magyar, the winner of the election, like he and his party did this like huge like barnstorming tour of like going to rural Hungary and talking to people who like haven't been campaigned at politically in a very long time, and like doing the organizing to like really do the thing. And I feel like that's a useful lesson, but it is a good question, like what comes next.
Totally. People are taking what they want out of it, and I think that's a little bit dangerous.
That is a little bit dangerous, totally. And I think that like I think that there's a way that people who are like on the like left progressive spectrum, we should be vigilant about not taking only what we want to hear from it as well, in terms of like, yeah, like what are the ways that Magyar's party was able to set the political stage for what they're doing, and then what is the task then before us to set the political stage for like a post MAGA United States? Just little stuff.
And I guess I have a question for both of you, which is, it's so interesting to me. I guess I'll use the word interesting. That the New York Times, their first kind of big op-ed about this was only talk about the economy, don't talk about individuals, don't talk about immigration. What do you make of that? Why do you think there is this rush to kind of use this kind of specious, not really fact-based position about what we should be taking away here in the States?
My thoughts are conspiracy. Like, let's be real, not at all reality-based. But I think, you're seeing this upsurge of people on, further on the left in the Democratic Party making some gains. And I think that obviously scares some establishment folks. And they're like, listen, in order to, Alyssa Slotkin, who's my senator, actually said something like this recently that I took great issue with, which is like, what it takes to win on the coast is not what it takes to win in the heartland, in the Michigan. I'm like, I live in Michigan. Like, my Iranian Muslim self lives in Michigan, along with a lot of other people who are like, what are you talking about? Like, there's this like really weirdly racially coded stuff around what does it take, what does it take to win the heartland, the places that Trump has won over. And so I think that's a lot of what they're trying to get at without being so visible about it. But also I think they're scared. They're scared about what a future looks like that is actually going to be progressive.
And I think what's interesting too is that like in special elections, in early primaries and stuff this year, we are seeing this like weird sort of bifurcation essentially of kind of like Democratic Party results. Like you have people like Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger, who are these more sort of like almost center-right figures who are talking about just the economy, right? But then you also have a bunch of progressives like crushing their races who are talking about things like racism, who are talking like, and like linking stuff like immigration and ICE and militarism to the economy in ways that I think are really like, they do speak to a lot of the things that people are thinking and feeling, but are like, I think kind of scary to those more like mainstream neoliberal Democrats. And like there is a split. I mean, I think it's worth saying also that this week, Ana Lilia Mejia in New Jersey won her Democratic primary in a very sort of like, yeah, like center right, like Democratic on kind of like, gay rights, racial justice, whatever, but like economically like a little more centrist district. And she's like, she was endorsed by the Working Families Party. She comes out of movement. So there are these like interesting sort of fissures that we're seeing. And like, I personally think this is a moment to really like assess what the, like where do we have strength as the left right now? Because it's not going to be everywhere. Like, to be real, it's not going to be everywhere. But I also think that like we don't know for sure until we do those tests of strength, until we run candidates in unlikely districts who have a really progressive message and are connecting these issues above and beyond just being like, we want everything to be normal and fine. Like, because I think a lot of people do have a sense that like what was happening before MAGA was not normal and fine either. So yeah, I feel like this is, high reality. I do think that right now it does. I bet this story is going to migrate into Signal as more things become clear. But I personally like where it is.
Yeah, I think you put it in exactly the right place.
I have another story for us, I'm sure. Oh, I really wanted to pull out this story that was in Prism this week, another Movement Media Alliance outlet, about Customs and Border Protection and their 527G agreements with campus police forces. I think what is interesting about this story is at the very beginning of this Trump administration, there was a lot of fanfare where like like somewhere between 15 and 20 campuses were college campuses were like, yes, we're going to sign these agreements. We have to collaborate with the regime, which is like, first of all, yikes. But the big story is that students and faculty at St. John's University in Queens successfully forced their university to roll back the agreement. We've covered on this show the ways in which people locally can pressure their sheriff's department, pressure their local police departments to not collaborate directly with ICE and CBP through 287G agreements. And I think it's really exciting to see effective organizing, even within the sort of like small community of a private university, like being able to get rid of an agreement, not just stop an agreement from happening, but really get rid of it. Obviously, the story will be in the show notes. I think anybody who is worried about the way in which local law enforcement collaborates with ICE and CBP should check it out, because I think there's some really interesting lessons there. To me, this is like, unfortunately, a high reality story in the sense that, like, we've seen ICE and CBP in particular being used to stifle speech on campuses, being used to kind of like scare the living daylights out of student activists. And I think it's also like pretty high signal in that, like, we can win, right? Like, when we fight, we win. It is true. And like, we can't win unless we fight. There's a lot of like still very scary news about ICE and CBP these days, and being able to see how a community was able to essentially push ICE and CBP off their campus is like very, very heartening.
Yes, I'm so, so glad you brought this story up. For many reasons, but exactly what you were just saying. And my biggest thing is that I feel like I have watched the last few years of people being like, where are all the student organizers? Where are all the student activists? And
we're busy.
Yeah, they're working, they're organizing, they're alive and well, baby. Like, this is what I love to see. And I just, the framing of, when we fight, we win. And I'm sure these youth weren't sure if they were going to have a win out of this, and they got a W. And I just, you love to see it. And I think it really, all the people who were like, ooh, well, where are all the student activists? And it's like, first of all, a lot of student activists are up against an infrastructure that is silencing them.
Correct.
That when I was first coming on the scene as a student activist, I was not up against. And so I want to own that piece, but they're still doing the work, and I love it.
I love what you said too about bringing in the kind of derision towards student activists, because what they're showing is that like there are actually other ways to do things that are not necessarily going to be visible to a layperson, but they're going to actually have these material results that will matter. So in that sense, to me, it's so high signal, so high noise or high reality, because it's like really real stuff that they're winning, and also in terms of when it comes to organizing protests in the future, not having these kinds of agreements is going to help protect students as well. So it's like these all kinds of like reverberating second order effects that are going to be, I have goosebumps. I'm so excited.
Yeah. I mean, like, shout out to those students. I also have been in some conversations about like, what is going to happen during the midterms. And there's this, threat about ICE going to the polls with midterms. And like, I think it also is a reminder that a lot of this organizing has to be hyper local, and that like, there are frankly also not enough ICE and CBP agents for there to be like a blanket, like, let's send ICE to the polls policy. It is going to be locally focused, and like getting into formation in your community is the way that you can get ready right now. So, Bridget, you have a story about India using AI to deny benefits to people. What is this about?
Yeah, this was a tough one. I would say it's one of those situations where a government deploys a tech solution, and the problem that tech solution creates is arguably worse than the problem that it was trying to fix. And this is those situations where it's like, well, damn, if this is the fix, like. So the story was first investigated by Decode with support from the Pulitzer Center. And the story goes that since July of last year, pregnant women and nursing moms across India have been getting denied food benefits that they are legally entitled to because a facial recognition system can't match their face to an old picture of your ID. And so that might not sound like much on its face, but the reality is that if you've ever been pregnant, you know that pregnancy changes the way that your face and your body looks. It's a very, very common thing. And so if you have an ID with a photo of it that was taken before your pregnancy, your face might look different while you're pregnant or after this pregnancy. And the scale of people who are being excluded from nutrition and food benefits that they are legally entitled to is pretty staggering. Nearly half of eligible women cannot access these food benefits because of this facial recognition technology.
That is wild. Half? Like,
When do you acknowledge it as a problem?
Right, exactly.
That feels
This
like
is
a good amount.
Exactly. And so I guess that's sort of why I wanted to bring this story to the conversation, because I almost feel like it's not like the people who designed this system maybe aren't thinking about this as a problem. I think that perhaps this is the system working as it was intended to work, which is to deny these moms the food that they're legally entitled to.
Yeah, and the knock-on effects of it are, I think, fairly obvious, that like women who are pregnant or like immediately postpartum and like nursing babies, whatever, that like them not having the nutrition they need is like, there are cascading effects that actually like are very profound and like perhaps lifelong for some of these people.
Exactly.
Also, who has less time to
Yeah.
put this?
I'm curious. I mean, I think that like this insight also about the system working as designed, it does make me wonder about, you know, it's like, I think there's so many ways that we use technology to kind of like put responsibility, like shed responsibility of individual decisions that then have deleterious effects on people downstream of those decisions. And it's like, oh, like I didn't do it, Claude did, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, there were human decisions at every level of this, including to use it in the first place.
I think that's exactly what's going on here, that they're almost like using the technology as a shield to not have to be accountable to their human decision making and human built infrastructure, because they can just say, oh, well, it's not me denying you the food. The AI system didn't work to that. The system is the thing that didn't give you the food. And I just think like, and that's almost sort of why I would put it in the noise category, weirdly enough, because I think blaming this as a tech failure is sort of creating noise, because it's not a tech failure, it's a human failure.
Yes.
But when we talk about it as simply a tech failure, I think the humans who are at the heart responsible for it get to evade responsibility and accountability.
I love that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, that like there's a and there's like a policy failure too, that it's like, why are we not just like blanket saying like making sure that like pregnant women and young children get adequate nutrition is just like our policy. It doesn't matter who you are. Who cares if somebody is getting extra rice for their family? You know, like it's sort of like a grim, it feels like a grim reflection on what our values are, right?
Exactly. And something to note is that the benefits and support that they're talking about in this story, it's not like discretionary handouts. These people are legally entitled to this support and to this food and to this nutrition. So like, it's exactly as you said. I think it's designing a tech system that enables people who are vulnerable to not get the support that they are legally entitled to.
Yeah, it is troubling, and unfortunately, it is a noisy reality that like so much of, I don't know, even when we're talking about like the automation of jobs and stuff like that, that like the decision then to lay people off in the face of automation is still a human decision. It's not like an inevitable outcome of using technology to make people's work easier.
Yeah, and I think that we love to have this fantasy that technology like AI is hyper aware, hyper intelligent computer brains, when in reality it's just humans the whole way down. It's built by humans, it's trained by humans, it learns from humans, it's deployed by humans. It's humans.
It's also Grok mixing up Erica Kirk and Drewski is like a perfect example here of like, it's just funny to have those two things right together.
What a good callback.
It's also fucking embarrassing is what I mean.
Yeah.
Yes. This is your AI facial recognition. So, yeah.
Negin, let's talk about Ahmed Shihab Eldin. Who is he? What is the story? And what's going on?
So Ahmed Shihab Eldin, he is a journalist. He is highly recognized. He is super prolific. You know, his work has appeared in the New York Times, PBS. He was a host for Huffington Post for a long time. He's someone who I think if people have followed Palestine news at all on social media, like you've probably encountered him under the @ASE handle, and right now, for the last over 40 days now, the time that we're recording this, he's been in a prison in Kuwait. So Ahmed, for full disclosure, he's a former colleague, so I feel like responsibility to bring up his story. But it's just a I would say it's a really high signal, high reality story in that, first of all, it's obviously happening, even though I think this news is coming to the public after several weeks of him being detained. And high signal because, well, I care about people being incarcerated. Like, that's obviously a really big issue, but also the stakes are so high for, I think, people in any country, whether you're in the US, whether you're in the Gulf, whether you're in Iran, about the way that this war has been censored, and who actually faces the impact of the censoring, right? So Ahmed is not the only person to be imprisoned for sharing footage, and it's not footage that he even took. He reposted a video that had been verified in Kuwait, and the allegations, we don't really exactly know what they are right now, but they're kind of these broad accusations that he's harming national security, and then misusing his phone. What does that even mean, right? Yeah, it's so upsetting and just so it's horrible. And so it's the way that they're kind of framing this issue, the way the Kuwaiti, authorities are framing this issue is like, oh, we need to do this we need to arrest this person, this journalist who's spreading verified information in order to protect our national security. Just shows what we're not seeing, like what's being censored from us. And it comes as like I said, you have other people who've been arrested for sharing stuff in the Gulf. You've seen, Israel, it has its own military censor. Iran, the internet has been shut down for weeks and weeks now. To the international, the connection that the Iranians have to the international internet has been shut down. In the US, we've seen satellite companies like Planet Labs say they won't share information because they don't want it to harm, quote, national security again, which has made it really hard for journalists to verify things that are happening. So I think it's super high signal, super high reality, both for what's happening to Ahmed and also for what we don't know.
This is the worst kind of high signal, high reality, where I also think that, like, there is not enough conversation on the internet about these kinds of things, and the fact that, like, just like after 9/11, like in the sort of like run up to the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, there were so many things done in the name of quote unquote national security that like we are still living with. Like they are alive and well, and like, 287G agreements are part of it, right? Like, again, to call back to another story that like so much of this is the post 9/11 reality and we're just living it, and it's like happening again. It rhymes and it's getting worse. And I think it's hard to look at because it also requires us looking at our complicity, but it's also like we have to look at it.
I'm just so glad that you're bringing this question to the forefront of like who gets silenced in the name of protecting, quote, national security. And I think we have a pretty clear answer of who that is. And it is just very upsetting how little we learn about how we can be swayed into supporting something if somebody in power tells us that it must be done to protect national security. And I think that's a big takeaway too.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I'm thinking like, Ahmed's case is one case. Like we know that this is happening to other people. And the fact that he is a well-known, well-respected journalist, like I think hopes shed some light on other people whose names we don't know, so who are being imprisoned. We've heard stories already of people being detained by ICE in the United States for, ties, alleged or not, to the Iranian state. So it's like, it is, I think it requires all of us to kind of look around and see what's happening in the name of national security and what does national security mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that placement. All right. My last story is kind of a fun one. It's a little silly. I don't know if you are all aware of this band, Geese. They're a rock band from Brooklyn. I have listened to their album. It is quite good. But, okay, I think the important thing about this story is these folks are very young, but they have been making music for a number of years. And they've had a couple of albums come out that, were moderate successes, but they had this sort of like breakaway overnight success with their most recent album called Getting Killed. And there was a story in Wired that has since been called out in the newsletter Garbage Day about this piece that Wired put out that was basically like repeating the like PR firms sort of like claims about their product, that they like did this like algorithm hacking on Geese's behalf. And so there's this sort of like multi-level who's the actual psyop here question, right? That's like Geese the band, they're not the psyop, to be clear. Like they're real people who are like making people actually like. But then this PR firm, Chaotic Good Project, again, a bunch of nerds, who claim that they can game the algorithms on TikTok and whatever to get their clients in front of more people. But then Wired turned around and just sort of like essentially reprinted their press release to be like, yeah, these things are totally possible. Spoiler alert, they're kind of not. Like a lot of the like this has always been the case. And as somebody who worked in digital advocacy around the time of like Upworthy and like that kind of thing, like I can tell you virality is not something that you can force. It's never been that way. And certainly it's like decreasingly that way given the complexity of the platforms and the algorithms that govern them. I think that this is conspiracy in the sense that like it's a lot of people sort of like blowing smoke at a lot of other people, right? It's like the Chaotic Good Projects wants us to believe that they can do this algorithm hacking. There's some weird thing about Wired breathlessly kind of covering this as if it's like a real thing. And it is signal in the sense that I think that there's so much we desire so badly to control these things that actually control us, right? In the attention economy, that I think we want to believe that this is true, that this is something that is possible. Shout out to Geese, you know, keep doing what you're doing, keep making music, but like I think it is just embarrassing to see the sort of like tech press just be like, yes, this is a real thing that people can do. And it's like, no, it's not. It never has been. It never will be. And like the willingness of people to actually participate in sort of forced trends has always been low, right? Like even with the advent of like common algorithmically generated content through generative AI or whatever, it's like people are interested in stuff that is authentic and stuff that is real. And I think that like by and large people can see it. So I'm happy to put this in conspiracy and signal.
Thank you for bringing a story that could not be more my shit. Like, this is such an intersection of shit that I just am obsessed with. And as somebody who makes a lot of, you know, content and reporting about technology, it can be tough. Like, when you find yourself essentially printing a press release for a tech company, take a step back and ask a few questions. They can really get you, though. They can be insidious.
If this were real, why is not every single band doing it? So.
Right, exactly. And like, well, like why, especially like why aren't the bands that are in fact like sort of industry darlings that are like really like making tons of money on tours and stuff like that, why aren't they doing it?
Also, Tax is a great song. Geese is great.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's just catchy. Like,
yeah, no.
Like maybe it helps, but yeah.
Side note, I am just pro like more kids picking up guitars again and like spending time like developing a skill. I'm glad that rock bands can still exist in the year of our Lord 2026. Great. Well, I guess that's our Attention Economy Navigator for April. Bridget, Negin, thank you both so much for taking the time and bringing these sort of some perplexing, some fascinating stories to us.
Thank you. This is so fun.
The pleasure was all mine.
My thanks again to Bridget Todd and Negin Owliaei for joining us this week. We will link to Negin's work with Truthout and Bridget's podcast, There Are No Girls on the Internet, in the show notes. This show is published by Convergence, a magazine for radical insights. I'm Caden Mock, and our producer is Josh Elstro. Kimmy David designed our cover art. Convergence Magazine is a proud founding member of the Movement Media Alliance. And of course, if you liked what you heard, please let us know. Be sure to subscribe for more episodes, tell a friend, or rate and review the show wherever you listen. It really helps us find new audiences. And of course, if you'd like to support the work that we do at Convergence, bringing our movements together to strategize, struggle, and win in this crucial historical moment, you can become a member at convergencemag.com/membership. Even a few bucks a month goes a long way to making sure our independent small team can continue to build a map for our movements. And I hope this helps.